Welcome back to another episode of The Wire. I'm Tomas Romo.
I'm Jesse Eckstein.
And this week, I think the big thing with us is like we got the power rankings. We've got the MLB almost about halfway through their season. We had the trade deadline happen. The NBA is getting pretty crazy with some of the things that are going on right now, such as the Heat are up 2-0 on the Bucks. Everyone thought they were going to go to the conference finals and maybe even win the NBA finals. They're down. The Raptors got lucky. Got to hit a nice three last night to avoid going down 3-0 against the Celtics. And we saw a great series against the Rockets and the Thunder. Now the Rockets got to go play the Lakers. The Nuggets and Jazz were a great series, and now they're playing the Clippers and got absolutely destroyed last night. And also, too, football is back next week. I mean, NFL starts next Thursday, Chiefs, Texans, and then Sunday we got a full slate of games. Sports is back. I mean, we've talked about it, since we did our first episode all the way up until now. We're like, things are going to start heating up. It's going to get back to the way it is. College football is heating up as well. And I think the biggest thing with me for baseball when it comes back to it is the surprise of that how good the Tampa Bay Rays have played. They're 26-12. They're first in the American League, only behind the Dodgers in the entire MLB. Dodgers are 29-10. Understandable. They have one of the best teams in all of baseball. And Tampa Bay, I mean, they're up on New York. Everyone thought New York, now that they had Garrett Cole, they'd run away with the division, but they haven't been able to stay healthy at all.
Yeah, the Rays are on fire. I mean, they're pitching. I said in their season outlook that they were going to be a team to beat, and they're giving the Yankees a run for their money. I mean, they're really dominating the Yankees this year, and they're 8-2 against the Yankees this season. And their pitching's been on fire, and Brandon Lowe's just been really leading the way on offense. And so I think they're the best team in the AL right now, and I think the Dodgers are definitely the clear favorite in the NL. They're 21-7 in August, and have won 10 of their last 12. And three of those were walk-offs, and like they've just been really coming in clutch. And Mookie Betts has been leading the way. He's an MVP player, and he's the third best in F4 and MLB with 2.1, and they have the best record in the MLB. So I think that they could definitely see their way to the World Series this year.
I think the biggest thing with Tampa Bay is that they're tied for fourth in the entire MLB in run differential. I mean, they're finding ways to not only score runs, but also their pitching has been pretty good. And the crazy thing is too, Charlie Morton, who was pretty much their ace the past couple years. I know Blake Snell won himself a Cy Young, but Morton was a workhorse. He really had himself great couple seasons after being with the Astros. And I mean, he's kind of fallen off a little bit. I think his ERA is around 3 to 4. But it's one of those things where it's like a collective whole. Their bullpen has pitched really well. I mean, like you said, Brandon Lowe has had a phenomenal year, and they're just finding ways to win games. I mean, there's plenty of times where you'll look and they'll be down 4-2 in the fifth or sixth, seventh inning, and they'll find ways to win the game. There's just some resilience there. And I think the biggest thing for me, too, as well, is that the Baltimore Orioles, I mean, everyone's out there, man, how many games are the Orioles going to win? They're 16-20, about middle of the pack in the American League. But the biggest disappointment for me is the Angels. I mean, 13-25, sitting near the bottom of not only their division, but also in the American League, and honestly, in the rest of baseball. I mean, the only two teams worse than them are the Nationals and the Pirates, as well as the Red Sox. But the Angels, for that good of a lineup they have, like, it blows my mind that they just can't find a way to not only score runs, but just no pitching. There's no pitching on that team at all. They have they're minus 27 on run differential. They allow 204 runs. That's how many they've allowed all season. They only scored 177. I mean, they just don't find ways, to help themselves win. They really don't. They struggle offensively, defensively. I mean, it's just such a disappointing year because Mike Trout, Anthony Rendon, you have Otani back. You still have Albert Pujols, Justin Upton. You got guys that were all-stars and guys who should be playing at a high level, but they can't do everything if you can't pitch. You can't throw strikes, you can't win the game.
Exactly. The Angels are definitely the most disappointing team this season. After adding Anthony Rendon, they had high hopes, but their pitching is just not getting it done. But in the AL, right behind the Rays, who is getting the pitching done is the Oakland A's. They are third in the league in ERA with 3.51 ERA, but their runs scored rank 18th in the league. So they're going to have to step it up on offense and try to get some wins out of one of the weakest schedules in the league. But right now they're doing well. They're at 22-12 right now. And so they're really doing well in the AL and leading the West, and I could see them winning the West over the Astros this year. And I think they're the second best team in the AL. And I think the second best team in the NL is right behind the Dodgers. You got the Padres. I think they're one of the most fun teams to watch. And Fernando Tatis Jr. is leading the way. And he's right behind, he's right in front of Mookie Betts actually in F4. And I was saying Mookie Betts is third, and Tatis Jr. is one of the players that's above him. So he's having an MVP caliber season this year, and I could see the Padres giving the Dodgers a run for their money.
I think the biggest thing with the Padres, they're going all in. They traded for Mike Clevenger. He had his first start last night. They lost 2-0 the Angels, which blows my mind that they couldn't score any runs against Andrew Heaney. Has like a 4.68 ERA, something like that they couldn't score any runs. But hey, the night before they had like an 8 or 10 run inning, and it's just one of those things. They have a lot of firepower. It's just finding ways to be more consistent, I think, is the biggest thing, because the Dodgers, they're consistent. They will right now, they're on a 5-game winning streak, and they're just finding ways to win. And I think they're going to have to really compete and be as consistent as possible, considering they're such a young team. And I think the biggest thing with me too on the AL side is the Toronto Blue Jays. They were my team that I think was going to break out, and they're tied right now with the Yankees, 20-16. They're in the last 10 games. They're 7-3. I mean, they're finding ways to win games. I mean, they really are. Last night they had a heck of a game against Boston. Went into extra innings. Teoscar Hernandez hit a 3-run home run, put them over the top. And I mean, it's just one of those things. They've added some pitching. They had Taijuan Walker. They have a lot of other young guys. They remind me a little bit of the Padres. I don't think they have as much firepower on the offensive side, but they're a pretty consistent team. And I'm really excited to see how that shapes out. You talked about the Astros as well. They're 21-15. They start off really slow, kind of bounce back. But Justin Verlander isn't in the picture right now. Bregman's not playing. Yordan Alvarez is out for the year. I feel like right now Houston will make the playoffs, but it's one of those things they know, I think, within the organization, that this isn't their year, to win themselves a World Series. Altuve has had a horrible season. And I think it's one of those things they didn't make any moves at the deadline. I thought that was kind of a surprise. I think they kind of accepted, we're just going to roll with what we have. Lance McCullers Jr. has pitched well. I think this is a team that maybe next season they can get some other group of players and figure out what's going to go forward. But they just really haven't been able to stay healthy, be consistent. But Michael Brantley's leading the charge. Carlos Correa's had a good year. I think a big surprise is Martin Maldonado. I mean, can't really hit the ball that well, but he's been on fire as of late. And I think the biggest thing for me, we talked about power rankings, and there's a lot of good teams. And if I had to give you, my top 5, I think starting at 5 would be, I think I would go with the Padres at 5. I think the only reason why I put them at 5 and not a little bit higher is just the case of that I'm waiting for that consistent factor to play out. And I think it's one of those things that they're one of the best teams in baseball, but they're still young. I think they got a little bit more to grow. But coming in at 4, I go with a little bit of surprise here, but at 4, I'm going with the Chicago White Sox. They're 23-15 right now, plus 42 run differential. They're tied with the Rays for 4th in the MLB. They're playing some good baseball. They've won 6 of the last 4, and in their last 10 games. And I think they're at number 4. Going in at number 3, I got the Oakland A's. Like you said, they're playing at a phenomenal level. I think they honestly have a really good shot of winning the West over the Astros. But the Astros have played well with them as of late. They won the series against Oakland, but I see them coming at number 3. Number 2, no question about the Tampa Bay Rays. They're the best team in the American League. And it's one of those things, if the Dodgers weren't as hot, I could see them as the number 1 team in baseball. But the Dodgers are just playing at such a high level. I mean, last 10 games, they're 8-2. I mean, they're the same as the Rays in that caliber, but there's too much firepower on that Dodgers team. And honestly, I think this might be the year they really go over the edge and go win themselves a World Series.
Dodgers have been on fire, and I think for my top 5, they're definitely in the number 1 spot. They're the best team in the league, and they're on a mission to win the World Series this year, and I could definitely see that happening. And at number 2, I think I have the Rays as well. Their pitching is just very stout and led by Blake Snell, former Cy Young last year. I think they can really make a run in the playoffs this year. And the Yankees were the favorite in that division, but they just took over. And a team that I think has been doing really well recently, you mentioned the Chicago White Sox, but the Cleveland Indians have won 2 in a row, and they're second in the league in ERA, so their pitching is amazing. So I think they come in at number 3 right there with the Oakland A's. They're both amazing at pitching, and they're both top 3 in ERA. So I think those two could meet each other in the playoffs and see definitely a good competition. And coming in at number 5, I also have the Padres. They're just so fun to watch and led by Fernando Tatis Jr. And they're 23-15, and they're just doing really well in the NL and giving the Dodgers a run for their money. And I could see them making a run in the playoffs.
Yeah, and like you said, baseball is going to get interesting. I mean, it's about halfway through the year. It's going to be interesting how everything kind of folds out. You know, are the Dodgers going to be able to remain hot? I mean, are the Padres going to fall off? People have talked about that. Are there any teams such as maybe the Mets or the Phillies who've been playing good as of late heat up? Did the Yankees finally get everyone healthy again? I mean, there's a lot of questions still to be answered, but it's going to be an exciting season to see how it all plays out. And I really do think it's the Dodgers' year.
The Dodgers are definitely the clear favorite, so I think I would be surprised if anyone could take them down this year.
And kind of moving on to the next segment, talking about the NBA, we've had some phenomenal series. I mean, the Nuggets coming down back from 3-1, Jamal Murray, I mean, unbelievable. And that just little 2-game tear that he went on, it was unbelievable. And it's one of those things that I feel bad for Donovan Mitchell and the Jazz. It's like they choke every time. It's, you know what I mean? It blows my mind that they can't just close it out, and they blew the 3-1 lead. But I think the big thing for me is that if they're going to have any chance against the Clippers, which last night we saw them keeping it close to about the third quarter and the Clippers just ran away with it, is that they just don't have the firepower. I mean, Jamal Murray was held to under 20 points. Jokic the same way. And it's one of those things like the Clippers are good, man. They are a good basketball team. They had a lot of rest. Denver got beat up in 7 games. I think the big thing, it's the same way for the Lakers. I mean, the Lakers are playing tonight against the Rockets, and the Rockets just went 7 games with a tough OKC team. James Harden looked gassed in Game 7. He had the great block, the game-winning block, but the Thunder really had a chance to win that game and kind of really run away with it and just missed up on some opportunities. Hats off to Chris Paul, but I think the same type of game is going to happen tonight with the Lakers. I think the Lakers are going to pound on the Rockets. They have more. They're rested. They really are. And I'd be surprised if Milwaukee doesn't win tonight. And if Miami goes up 3-0, that'd be a big surprise to me as well.
Yeah, you mentioned the Nuggets and the Jazz series. That was very fun to watch. The Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray matchup. That was incredible. And Jamal Murray has just been popping off for the Nuggets. Forced to Game 7 with the 50-point performance, and they went on to win. But they're really going to need him against the Clippers, who have Paul George and Kawhi, and they're just dominated in Game 1. And they beat the Mavs in 6. And the Mavs, I think their championship window is open, but they were just a little short this year.
Mm-hmm.
Got an unfortunate draw with the Clippers, who are one of the best teams in the league. I think Luka performed like the superstar he is in his playoff debut, but they're going to need to re-sign Porzingis and add some weapons for him, and Porzingis is going to need to stay healthy. But you mentioned the Rockets. The series against the Thunder was a little rocky towards the end, but they were able to secure the win after James Harden struggled offensively down the stretch, but he came up big with the block against Lou Dort, who had an incredible game in Game 7. But the Thunder fell up short, and the Rockets have to face the number 1 seed Lakers now, who I think are definitely going to overpower the Rockets. And I think even though the Rockets got past the Thunder, I think the Lakers are going to be too much for them.
I agree, same way. I honestly think the series goes maybe I think it could go 6 games. I really do think it goes 6 games. I think the Rockets, just because if they're on, the Lakers don't really have the firepower to answer them in that regard. I know they have Anthony Davis and LeBron, but they just don't have a 3-point shooting team where all 5 of their guys can shoot like that. And I think it's one of those things that the Rockets, we saw that little small ball lineup kind of fold towards the end of the series with the Thunder when James Harden wasn't dropping, 30, 20, 25 to 30 points a game. They were struggling. Russell Westbrook had really bad games when he came back, and it's one of those things they got to figure that out there if they want any chance to beat the Lakers. And like you said, I mean, I think the Lakers will overpower them at the end of the day. Anthony Davis, LeBron James, I think are too physical for them for the Rockets, and I don't see James Harden or Russell Westbrook being able to stop that, or really anyone on that team. And I think the big thing for me is that Boston, Toronto, it blows my mind that the defending champs, I know they lost Kawhi Leonard, but for the most part, they're the same team. And I think the biggest disappointment has been Kyle Lowry and Pascal Siakam. They have not played to their level. Fred VanVleet had a heck of a game last night, just to get them to the point of, hitting the game winner. And it's one of those things where, hey, the shot fell. I mean, it happened. They won the game down 2-1, but I think Boston is a really good team. They are a young team, and they don't even have Gordon Hayward right now, which I think some people don't realize is a valuable asset for them off the bench. And once he comes back, they say he won't be here for the Toronto series, but if he comes and plays, I think Miami is going to win the series against the Bucks. I really do. And I think if Boston, Miami get there, if they get Gordon Hayward, Boston might have themselves a chance to be in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, without Gordon Hayward, the Celtics have been fine so far. I mean, Jason Tatum's been leading the way. He had 34 the other night before the Raptors in game 2, before the Raptors won in game 3 on a game-winning shot. And Jaylen Brown was really angry and disappointed and just heated about the miscommunication on that play, saying they should have won the game. But OG Anunoby hit the game-winning shot, and instead of going down 3-0, they're still in the series and up 2-1. The Celtics are up 2-1, but I see the Celtics really just putting their head down and closing out this series in 5. I just don't think the Raptors can compete, and I feel like the Celtics are going to bounce back after this loss. But you mentioned the Lakers. I think the Rockets could have a couple good games and get hot, but I think the Lakers will win in 6 as well. Like, LeBron is on a mission, and he's won in that other ring, and the series starts tonight at 8, so it's going to be really fun to watch that.
I really would love a LeBron James Boston finals. I really would. I think the Lakers, the Boston, I mean, Kobe and, the big three that was there with Boston. I think that'd be such a cool matchup. And I think the big thing is the Heat. The Heat aren't going down. Jimmy Butler, that dude, when they say it, he is a dog. He plays phenomenal offense, defense, and he just wants to win, and he finds ways to win. And when it matters, he doesn't miss. I'm not saying he's the greatest shooter on that team, because he's not by any means, but when it matters, give the ball to Jimmy Butler, and he's taken over. And I think the big thing for me, I think Miami wins that series, like we said, Lakers in 6. Boston closes out. I don't see Denver beating the Clippers at all. I think that's going to be a quick sweep for them. But I think the key for the Lakers is, knowing that the Clippers are matched up against Denver, that they got to handle their business against Houston, and kind of be smart about it, because they should know that the Clippers might have a little bit more rest than the Lakers will. So they just got to be smart about that, and just, can't make mistakes. They can't find themselves going 7 games with Houston. I think if they could win in 5, that'd be the ideal. But they're going to have to play pretty good basketball to take down Houston, because if Houston's hot, it's tough to beat them. But at the end of the day, I feel like, to me, after watching, all this series unfold, I really do think right now it's going to be interesting to see the Lakers and the Clippers. I think they both win the next series and go to the conference finals. But I still got the Lakers as my pick. I'm going to ride with that. But in the East, I'm definitely going to go with Boston. I see a Lakers-Boston final, and I'm really excited for that one.
Yeah, since the beginning, we've seen the LA teams. They made the additions in the offseason to put themselves in a position to win. So I think they're going to get the series wins coming up in the semifinals. And the Heat have definitely been a surprise team for me. I mean, they came in as the 5 seed, and they're up 2-0 against the number 1 seed Bucks. And Jimmy Butler's just been dominating, and he had 40 points in game 1. And they're up 2-0, so I could see them beating out the Bucks. I mean, I just think the Heat plays so together as a team, and Jimmy Butler doesn't even have to put up big numbers to lead them to the win. But even if he does, then the Bucks just have no chance. And Giannis is an MVP player, but I just think there's not enough weapons for them to overtake the Heat, already down 2-0 in the series.
Right. And just kind of switching over to the next last final subject is NFL's back, man. It's less than a week away. Teams are finalizing, some roster cuts. And I think the biggest thing for me is, I mean, we saw today Adrian Peterson got cut uh, from the Washington football team. Still blows my mind that I have to say Washington football team. They couldn't think of anything else. But we saw some other moves. We got Patriots officially announced Cam Newton as their starting quarterback. Big no surprise, the Cowboys released HaHa Clinton-Dix, which is a big surprise considering he played with Mike McCarthy in Green Bay. I mean, I think the key to watch is like, hey, let's see what happens if Earl Thomas really, maybe the Cowboys are trying to free up some room to sign him. Who knows? I think another thing is if Tua somehow finds his way starting for the Dolphins. Fitzpatrick has been out due to his mother's passing. And it's one of those things that Tua might take the job. But I'm really excited for this football season. I think there's a lot of ups and downs. We saw Leonard Fournette get signed by the Buccaneers, building a little super team down there in Tampa Bay. But it's going to be interesting to see how the NFC, I feel like, is very competitive compared to the AFC because I feel like the Chiefs are just going to run away in that conference. But the NFC is going to be really interesting to see how it all unfolds. And I really do think that there's two to three good teams in every division in the NFC. I mean, you look at the East, you got Dallas and you got Philly. You go to the South and you got the Bucks, you got the Saints. Who knows how good Teddy Bridgewater and the Panthers are going to be. Matt Ryan is still – the Falcons are not a bad team. They just can't play it good all the time. They're just very inconsistent. And then you go down to the West and you got Seattle and you got Arizona on the come up, and you also have San Francisco who went to the Super Bowl last year. It's really going to be interesting how it's all going to fold. You got the North with Green Bay and Chicago. Maybe Nick Foles might reunite that team and they go back to being how they were. You still got the Vikings, the Lions. Who knows? But there's just a lot of good teams in the NFC.
Yeah, I think the NFC is very more balanced compared to the AFC, which is a lot more top heavy. But you mentioned the NFC West. I think that's going to be a really competitive division. San Fran in the Super Bowl last year, I could see them returning to the playoffs, but that's a tough division. I mean, the Cardinals have Kyler Murray in his second year, and he could really make a difference. And the 49ers, they got Jimmy G, but they lost a couple weapons, and Seattle's got Russell Wilson leading the way. So I could see that coming to play, like playing out anyway. Like all three of those teams can compete, so it's going to be fun to watch and see how that turns out. And in the South, I mean, Drew Brees is leading the Saints. The Bucks are making moves. They just signed Fournette, who was released by the Jags, who are in full tank for Trevor mode. And I just think the Saints are the best team in the NFC right now. Even though the Bucks have all these stars, I think Drew Brees is still one of the best leaders in football. I think they have one of the best lineups top to bottom. They're hungry to get back to the Super Bowl. So I could see them winning that division and winning the NFC.
And I think my question for you, I would think, is playoffs are expanded, and we haven't seen nothing. We didn't get to see no preseason games, nothing. But just based off of purely of who you think in the NFC, I'm really curious to see who do you think is going to get in. I mean, not only just win the division, but now that there's the extra playoff team, like, how do you think that's all going to unfold?
Well, I think you got the teams at the top. You have the Saints and the Packers in the North, and I think the Dallas is gonna come out in the East. And in the West, it's anyone's ball game. I think the 49ers probably going to take that one again, possibly Seattle overtaking them. But I think the Cardinals could even get in with the extra team. And the two wildcard teams, you could get the Eagles. They could make a run for their money. And then I think in the South, the Falcons are going to make a run for the Buccaneers and Saints money. I think the Buccaneers are definitely going to get in with leading the way by Brady. And I think with the extra team, you could see a couple teams like the Falcons or the Cardinals even make the playoffs.
I think the big thing for me is I think in the East, I think Dallas has it. I really do think they're going to bounce back. I mean, that three-headed monster of Gallup, Lamb, and Amari Cooper is too much. Dak, again, betting on himself that he's going to go out there and do it again. I think without Jason Garrett, Mike McCarthy is going to turn this guy into something great. they talked about too. What's the difference between last year and this year is that they're finding ways to disguise their offense to be less predictable. Dallas for the last 3 seasons have been predictable. They know when they're running the ball, they know when they're throwing the ball, and it's not been easy. And I think for me, Dallas wins the East. The North, I think Green Bay right now with the whole Jordan Love fiasco, it can go one of two ways. Either Aaron Rodgers is going to show him why he's Aaron Rodgers and that he belongs to be that starting quarterback, or that team is going to regress and they're going to get rid of Rodgers and Jordan Love's going to take over that team. To me, I'm betting on Rodgers. I mean, I feel like that's the safe bet. I think the Packers still win the North. I think Dallas wins the East. Honestly, I think it's going to take time for Tom Brady to get adjusted there with Tampa Bay, and I think the Saints win that division. I really do. I think the Saints come up on top there in the South, and in the West, I think San Francisco regresses. Seattle wins the division, and I think when it comes to those extra playoff teams, I think for me, the Bucs get in. I think another team, like you said, is the Falcons might have a chance there, but I think to me a big sleeper team that if I don't know what could happen there, but is the Rams. If Jared Goff can get back to playing Jared Goff football, I could see them finding a way to get in with a young running back core. Cam Akers they just drafted, who's a physical guy. He's quick, he's physical. I think they could still do a lot that they did with Todd Gurley with him in that system. The Rams might get a chance to get in. I also see another team as the Bears. Who knows how that's going to unfold if Nick Foles can get back to playing good football. San Francisco's still in the mix as well, but I could see San Francisco not making the playoffs this year. I could see them totally regressing back and just not having a good year. I feel like there's about six to nine teams there in the NFC that really has a chance to make the playoffs. It's going to be interesting with the extra playoff team. But I think for me, that 1 seed is the big key, considering that's the only team who gets the bye now. And honestly, that 1 seed, I could see it going to either, Bucks or Saints. Let's see how that unfolds, which team is better. And honestly, I'm thinking Dallas as well. I could see Dallas being 13-3 or 12-4 and getting that. But we'll see what happens there in the NFC.
I agree. I think the Dallas is definitely the team in the NFC East with the Packers in the North. I think Aaron Rodgers is definitely going to come out and prove that he's the guy. I mean, they did the same thing with him and Brett Favre. He was behind Brett Favre, and then he came in once Brett Favre was too old. So I think Rodgers still has a couple good years under his belt before Jordan Love could be the future of the Packers. But I think the Saints are going to be the number 1 seed in the NFC. I think the Bucs are close, but I just don't think that – I think Gronk won't be the same player that he was before, and I think the running back situation is just a battle that's going to be needed to figure out before they can reach domination and true success. And I think the Rams, that's an interesting pick, but I think with Cam Akers upgrading that running back, Todd Gurley's fallen off. I mean, they were one of the best teams in the league 2 years ago, and they were in the Super Bowl and lost to the Patriots. But with the expanded playoff, they could find their way in and get back to success. But in the AFC, I think in the East, I think the Patriots, they're betting on Cam Newton, but I just don't think he'll be enough. Definitely a downgrade from Tom Brady. I mean, he hasn't played a full season in a couple of years, and I think the Bills are definitely the team to beat in that division. And in the West, the Chiefs are the favorite in the whole conference. I mean, you got the Broncos right behind them. I mean, they could be a threat, but Drew Lock is definitely the X factor. He's going to have to prove himself. He came in last year, won 4 out of the 5 games, and he has the weapons around him to help give the Broncos a chance to give the Chiefs a run for their money. But I think that the Chiefs are still going to come out on top in that division. And in the South, this is going to be an interesting division. I mean, it could go in any direction. The Titans found themselves in the AFC Championship last year, but they're going to need Tannehill to perform and help take some of the load off Derrick Henry, who's really been leading the way for the Titans, especially in the playoffs last year. And the Colts made some bold moves in the offseason. They signed Phillip Rivers, who's 38 now, so that's definitely a gamble. But if that pays off, they could win this division. And the Texans, they trade away Hopkins, so I honestly don't think they're going to compete as much this season. Deshaun Watson is still one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but I just don't think he has the weapons around him to make a difference. And the Jags are definitely at the bottom of the AFC. They're in tank mode. They just released Fournette, and they're really not going to make a difference. And I can see Baltimore in the North really making a run this year and possibly getting to the AFC Championship after losing to the Titans last year. So I think they're hungry and they want to prove themselves. And I just don't think Lamar Jackson is satisfied, so they're going to want more. And the Steelers have Ben Roethlisberger coming back, but I think he's getting old and he was injured last year. So I just don't think that'll be enough to beat the Ravens.
I think the big surprise that I'm going with in the AFC is that Cam Newton's on a mission, man. He is going to win that division. I think Buffalo, Josh Allen, I still do not have complete confidence in. I could see them getting in the wild card spot, but New England takes that division. I think that's just a whole new game plan. They're going to have to go with Cam Newton there at quarterback than Tom Brady. I think they open up the offense a little bit more, being a little bit less predictable. In the North, Baltimore's got that on lock. They really do. But a real big surprise to me is how does Cleveland bounce back? Is this the year Baker Mayfield shows everyone else why he was the Heisman winner, why he was the first overall pick, why that, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, I mean, they got Austin Hooper as well. They gave him weapons. They got Nick Chubb. They still have Kareem Hunt. Like, offensively, there should be no question that the Browns should be able to score points. And I think another thing, too, is the Bengals. I mean, how's Joe Burrow going to play? Is he going to play, is it going to click for him right away? Is it going to take a learning curve? I don't know. That's a big question there. Same with the Dolphins. What about Tua or the Jets even? Let's say Sam Darnold has a good year. Le'Veon Bell gets back on track. There's a lot of what-ifs in the AFC where I feel like the NFC is more of a solid, win or loss. Like, who's the lock to win the NFC? I feel like there's a couple question marks there, but not as much as the AFC. But going down to the South, like you said, the Houston Texans losing DeAndre Hopkins. But I think the big thing, they lost him, but they got Brandon Cooks, they got Randall Cobb, they still have Will Fuller. They got a lot of speed. I feel like that's what they have. They were really dependent on the big plays of Hopkins and, being a big physical receiver. When I think now they're just going to, screw it. Deshaun Watson, we're just going to go deep. We're going to air it out every time. We're going to hand the ball off to David Johnson. They also have Duke Johnson as well, who's really nice in the passing game as well. And I think Tennessee takes a step back. I don't think Ryan Tannehill has the same year as he did. And I think the Colts might be a team that might sneak in there as well. Phillip Rivers. I mean, they went 7-9 last year with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. I could see them winning some games with Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers finally has an offensive line. He's got good receivers. He's got T.Y. Hilton. He's got Paris Campbell. I mean, they got some young guys on that team that might have a chance to compete. They just drafted running back Jonathan Taylor out of Wisconsin. He's a heck of a runner. I think that'll take the pressure off of Phillip Rivers as well. In the West, I think Kansas City they were 12-4 last year. I really could see them winning 14 games, maybe even 15, honestly. I really don't see a team that can beat them besides maybe Baltimore. It's very interesting to see how that week 1 matchup with the Texans goes. But Denver, like you said, Drew Lock, X Factor. The Chargers are the big question mark. Tyrod Taylor starting, but Justin Herbert, I feel like, will come in eventually. And the Raiders, I want the Raiders to do something so bad. I think John Gruden deserves it. I think that team needs it. And I think for me, there might be a point in time where we might be seeing Marcus Mariota starting a game for the Las Vegas Raiders. And I think they got Henry Ruggs out receiver. I mean, they got Tyrell Williams, who's kind of battling some injuries right now. But, I mean, they got guys. They really do. Josh Jacobs is a heck of a running back. Is going in his second year, has a chance to make a splash there. But it's going to be one of those things that they can put all together. And if Derek Carr can finally, play some consistent football and their defense, plays up to the level they should be playing at. But there's a lot of question marks in the AFC. I'm very curious to see how that plays out.
Definitely going to be interesting to see, and especially with all this COVID stuff going on and the expanded playoff. There's going to be new teams in the playoffs, and we always see the Chiefs have the home field advantage that everyone talks about, but with no fans, that's going to be interesting to see how that affects them. But I think they're the best team, and they're the team to beat in the AFC. And in the NFC, I think the team to beat is the Saints. So it's going to be interesting to see how these two conferences play out. There's a ton of storylines to watch, and it's going to be a fun season.
And at the end of the day, like I said, football's back on Thursday, Sunday. We got a full slate of games. It's going to be interesting how everything works out, especially, we talked about the MLB with, halfway through the year and, playoffs coming with the NBA. But hey, the NFL starting up. We're going to see who's going to be the X factor this year? Last year was Lamar Jackson, the Ravens. No one thought that they would come out the way they were. The Chiefs, people expected Pat Mahomes to have a great year. But I think there's going to be a team that's going to bust out. I think there's a team, whether it's, maybe it's New England, maybe it's Cleveland, honestly. Maybe it's a team like Denver or Las Vegas, or maybe even the Colts jump out ahead early. We'll see what happens, but I'm excited. I'm excited for the NFL to be back, football to be back, college football is coming back as well. I know we don't have all the conferences playing, but it's going to be interesting how everything unfolds, and I'm looking forward to another great year.
Same here. I'm pumped. NFL starts in 6 days. We've got the NBA playoffs and the semifinals. So we'll see who gets to the finals, and we'll have to see how that plays out. And the MLB's making their way towards the end of the season, going into the second stretch. And after the trade deadline, teams made moves. The Padres made moves. So we'll see if they can do anything to try to beat the Dodgers, but the Dodgers leading the way right now. So I think they're going to see their way to the World Series. That's my prediction, and I think that it's going to be a lot of fun to watch all these sports play out.
And again, thanks for tuning into another episode of The Wire. I am Tomas Romo.
I'm Jesse Eckstein.
And we'll see you next time.